And now I would love to welcome Mrs. Manisha Gupta. She will be our moderator. She focuses on AI strategy, adoption leader at the Oracle. And she has over 2 decades building and scaling products across enterprise and startups, including leadership roles at Oracle, LinkedIn, eBay, and Cisco. Manisha works at the intersection of artificial intelligence, people intelligence, and decision making, helping organizations turn AI into measurable business value. She will now be leading a powerful conversation today with 4 other speakers, which will be Ms. Sonia Kadiyal, Deepak Ramola, Asra Khan, and Pravin Kaipa.
Well, welcome everyone. All right, so I'll just say a little bit. I think, thank you for the introduction. I'll pass on the mic and we'll talk about what each of us does and why we are here today. But I'm going to say I'm a technologist. My journey started hardcore engineering, product management. I've been leading a product called People Intelligence for Oracle. And essentially the focus of that product was how do we bring the intelligence out of people to make a company profitable in a sustainable manner, right? So in a nice way. Then AI came. So I started focusing a lot on AI and I. So in the land of AI, when AI is evolving and I am evolving as a human being, how do the two coexist? Then we started talking a lot about intelligence is becoming so easy, right? You ask a question today, I saw like I don't know, he was almost like a little bit older than a toddler who was asking a question so confidently. Like every single soul in this world, doesn't matter age or where they are doing something or the other with AI. They may not even know what they're doing, right? So the question really goes to, if intelligence becomes so abundant, you ask a question and before you can finish it, you have 5 answers in front of you. How do you decide what's right? So one question for all of us to maybe ponder on today is, as intelligence becomes abundant, what is the differentiator? All of us will have a sea of sameness, tons of answers. How do you decide what's right, what's wrong? And that is the point which excites me a lot about this panel today, because I think in my history, I'm pretty old. First time I'm not talking only to technologists. I'm talking to Deepak, who talks a lot about wisdom, Sonia, who's a lawyer, and who's next? We have Praveen, who's a Stanford professor and AI technologist, and we have Asra, who's a youth entrepreneur leader, right? So we're going to jump. We have only 20 minutes, so I'm going to be very sweetly strict, if it's okay. We will jump. So no technologist except me, and I'm not a part of the panelists. So hear them out, because you'll probably get really wonderful new ways of thinking, which are going to be much more real and applicable on different aspects, right? So very quickly, I'm just going to ask one question, and just to tie break, quickly answer, what is responsible intelligence for each of you?
I'm going to start that way.
Yeah, put me on the spotlight. Okay, so responsible intelligence, since we work in the youth space, and I think in the earlier session today as well, people were talking about, oh, the young people are going to use AI for like cheating on their exams or like trying to just get good grades. But I think this is where UC Berkeley puts its AI code of conduct into place, which is where you can use original thought, you do not use AI. So for creativity, for communication, that's something Neeru has been talking about in the morning as well. It's like using it responsibly is how it lets your creative juices flow, how you actually use it as a thought partner instead of like an AI assistant, as it has been labeled every time. So when you use it as a thought partner, it tells you the flaws in the system or the problems that you're trying to solve if you are thinking of it as an entrepreneur. So yeah, I think I will say using AI responsibility will be synonymous to using it for thought partnership.
Can I just request you to say one thing about yourself as you, like, who are you, just for one line?
Okay, so I'd say I'm a software engineer turned educator. I worked in tech for a few years, then working with youth, education, helping them solve problems around them is what made the switch to education, and since then I have supported innovation labs and accelerators with entrepreneurship curriculum and did my own edtech startup for a while before moving to the US.
So I believe that technology should be used to enhance human equity, creativity, and connectivity. And I think we have a real opportunity here to be able to change the way that we operate in the education system. Education, I believe, for too long has been focused on grades, rote memorization, and standards-based tests and assessments. And I think we have an opportunity here to change, to have a paradigm shift within education towards more skills-based learning and to show students a practical view of how we can use this information that we have at our fingertips now. Because you can Google anything, you can ChatGPT anything, Gemini, Claude, whatever you want to call it. But the reality is, purpose is what drives us now. And I've been teaching for 15 years all over California. I've taught English language learners, students with special needs, students who are taking AP tests, students who are high socioeconomic backgrounds, low socioeconomic backgrounds. And the commonality is this, that engagement comes from purpose. And if we can give our students and our families and our people purpose, then responsible intelligence will come with that. And then just a little bit about myself. I've been teaching for 15 years. I'm an AI for Equity Fellow this year. I believe that AI should be used, like I said, to enhance human equity, creativity, and connectivity. And I try to strive to provide my students with opportunities to use their creativity every day, because I believe creativity is just intelligence having fun.
Thanks so much. It's really great to be here with all of you on this unusually rainy day. My name is Sonia Katyal. I teach at the law school here at Berkeley. And I suppose I probably have the most, I think, incongruous story compared to many of you. I was actually trained as a civil rights lawyer when I was in law school, which was so long ago that it was before the onset of the internet. So I trained as a civil rights attorney, and it was actually after my graduation from law school, when I was clerking for a federal judge, that I started to see the first cases kind of emerge around the internet. And I started to realize that all of the things that I cared about with respect to equality and due process and privacy were kind of emerging in this new space of tech. So I immediately pivoted, and I started thinking about kind of civil rights in this new space of technology. And that is kind of the story that has sort of led me to doing work on AI. So in my work on AI, I think about a couple of different things. Number one, and this relates to kind of designing responsible AI, one of the things that I think a lot about is the responsibility of regulation. How do we design regulation to be more attentive to the kinds of needs and concerns of the everyday consumer, but also the needs and concerns of individuals who are seeking to get information from private businesses about how their AI standards or their AI practices are operating. So I do a lot of work on intellectual property. One of my main areas is on trade secrecy and trying to figure out how to get companies to be a little bit more public-facing about the often secretive and proprietary AI practices that they engage in that implicate many of us as citizens. And then the other thing that I think a lot about when I think about designing systems of responsible AI is the public, right? So how do we empower the youth of America? How do we empower individuals to think critically about the AI practices that they engage in? And also, how do we empower businesses to take things one step further than simply what the law requires? So as someone who studies law, I can see that our regulatory frameworks are very well developed in the EU. They're less developed here. We certainly see challenges at the federal level with respect to the commitment of regulating AI. And so how do we encourage businesses to think more critically about the AI practices that they're engaging in? And so I would say that one part of that is not about just the role of law, but it's also about the role of ethics, and it's about the role of kind of thinking beyond what is merely required to thinking more broadly about what does it mean to be responsible, what does it mean to be transparent, and so on. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. Hello, my name is Deepak Ramola, and I deeply love potatoes, people, and possibilities, in that order. I say that because probably that's one part of my life you can't Google, and in a room where we're talking about AI, I think it's very important to talk aspects of ourselves that are rooted in our own stories and experiences. I teach at Stanford a course called Designing Your Life, and I have studied for the last 17 years how people become wise and what lessons we learn from our lived experiences across different communities in the world. Responsible intelligence to me means exactly what it has meant even before AI: to be accountable, to have ownership of how your knowledge interacts with the world around you, how it serves the communities that you are a part of, and even names and faces that you have no connection with on a day-to-day basis. How does your work, your life, your decisions impact? For the first time, I think, in human history, in such a tangible way, we get to see intelligence outside of ourselves in some technological, tangible way. And so we can look outside ourselves to be able to take that responsibility, but I think it's also a dual play of, and now what will you do with your own intelligence? How accountable will you be with the tools you create, with the vibe coding that you're experiencing? What will result out of it that doesn't just serve you, but serves people around you in a way that benefits their life and scaffolds their learning?
Awesome. So, well, we are talking about AI, but we covered creativity, we covered purpose, we covered governance, and we covered wisdom. They are not normally things you talk about in a room full of AI folks. So hopefully you are registering those things. I'm going to ask every one of you a question. How many of you are using AI today? How many of you know how AI decides what answer to give you or how to do its job? Okay, so the room hands fell 50%, right? And that gap in your, if I ask Deepak, hey Deepak, what should I eat today? Maybe I'll get potatoes, but I can ask, why the hell do you think I should eat potatoes? If I ask AI, it will keep answering your questions, but you don't know where AI is coming from. You don't know where the wisdom is, you don't know what the governance is, you don't know what the purpose is, and you don't know what the creativity or the, what was the reason why it did what it did. And I think it's one way of looking at responsible intelligence, if I can summarize from this panel, is take charge yourself, dig a little deeper. If I'm using LLM, if I'm using whichever, Claude or Gemini or OpenGPT or WhatsApp, doesn't matter. YouTube has a lot of good videos also, sometimes random, but take some time to understand what is happening behind the scenes. And there's a lot of people who are doing a lot of content to really make things simple, like we just heard in the discussion right before us. Okay, so with that, we have 6 minutes and 50 seconds, so it's going to be really, really quick. And I'm going to ask a specific question from each of you. I'm going to start with you, Praveen. You are the professor in the room, oftentimes, and you're talking about AI. Is the old way of learning and the old way of grading still applicable today?
No. I don't think that it's applicable. I think, especially in my classroom, whenever we finish a unit, I think it's important to have like a portfolio where they can show their parents, their fellow educators, or admin, hey, this is what I learned, because I think you're 10 times more likely to learn something if you can teach it to somebody else.
Okay, so from learning, we are going to move to wisdom, if it's okay. And you have been, from what I understand about you, you've been like really traveling the world and understanding what wisdom is. Now with AI, answers are on my fingertips and intelligence is everywhere. What is wisdom in the era of AI?
For the longest time, we've seen wisdom as either an abstract virtue or a dogmatic principle in religion or philosophy. In the last decade, cognitive science, neurobiology, my own work in anthropology has sort of told us invariably from across domains that wisdom is actually a super skill. It's made out of 6 sub-skills that are very, very human, from perspective taking to dealing with uncertainty to having emotional stability to being reflective, having an understanding of self, to pragmatic knowledge of life, how to file your taxes, how to measure things, how to pay money. And last and most important distinction between intelligence and wisdom, which is pro-social attitudes, thinking about common good. An intelligent person may think about the good of others. A wise person has to think about the good of others. And to answer your question about the role of that AI in our sense, in my classroom at Stanford, I'll give you a very concrete example how this has shifted. A student came to me last quarter and said, I don't want you to grade me on my essays. I want you to grade me on who I am as a person in this classroom. And he said, here are my 4 indicators, one of which is, do I have a presence in this classroom? And he said, AI is helping me be very articulate with my assignments. I got all that covered. I don't need your feedback. But how do people experience me? I can't ask AI. So I feel like that quality of human expectation and human engagement and how people relate to your identity, your vibe, your presence, and just what you make them feel in the micro instances is something that we still need to work a lot on. So AI can create a great profile and personality test for you, but how does that play out in real room? You still need to ask people and hopefully create more avenues.
Thank you. I think we need to automate your wisdom in some ways. And let me come to you, Sonia, like AI and transparency, right? So how can we make things more transparent? So maybe some aspects of what Deepak just talked about becomes part of life, and maybe we can test it a little bit more?
Yeah, so along with the idea of presence, I guess I think about technology in a bunch of different ways when it relates to transparency. But I think one of the most important things that I've learned in the work that I've done on technology, information, and regulation is that, the early builders of the internet were particular kinds of revolutionaries in ways that I feel are so deeply emblematic of why so many of us are drawn to tech. I think that was, and there still is, a tremendous commitment to openness through open source, through different ways of kind of figuring out how to connect knowledge and share knowledge and build knowledge to build great products. And I think that we're all the beneficiaries of that. The Googles, the Microsofts, whatever, are the product of that kind of openness. So I think we can think about transparency on that level as kind of a technical layer of sharing knowledge. But then how do we think about transparency on sort of a personal level? And here's where I actually think that AI literacy is one of the most important tools to have in your toolbox. So we all, as people who use AI, we think a lot about different kinds of products. Do we often think about the data that those products are trained on, whether or not the data is sufficiently diverse? Is it representative of the diversity of our own human experiences? How can we ask questions when decisions are derived from AI about how those decisions were reached and on what kinds of data these AI systems were trained on to reach these certain decisions? Certainly in the work that I do, I see a real disparity between individuals that are of a higher socioeconomic layer and those who are less privileged. People who, for example, are in the criminal justice system, or people who receive social service benefits, or people who are more governed by the sort of everyday social services of governance. They're often reduced to numbers. They're often subject to regulations, decisions, and restrictions. And they are often sort of the most vulnerable and the most important to empower with traditions of AI literacy. And so when I think about transparency, I think about it as not a one-size-fits-all situation. I think about it as tied to the relationships that we all have with our individual, local, and federal governments, but also the kind of information that we need to decide for ourselves how we want AI to govern us.
Thank you, Sonia. Asra, we are short of time, but tell us what, you're dealing a lot with the young entrepreneurs, right? So with transparency, wisdom, what can a young founder today do to feel, or at least know, that whatever they're building with AI is actually going to be good for human?
Talk to humans. I think this is a mistake that I see a lot of young founders doing, is that it's so much easier to build now. But what is hard is to find evidence that what you're building is going to work in real world context, through wisdom, through governance. Is it the right way to build it? We know that these tools are making so easy to be a founder, but the real challenge is, how do you distribute? And sometimes we do see, so this is an exercise that we do with our students. It's called customer discovery, where they go out and they have to interview 5 people every week. And we say AI, as it's all turned out to be like applied intention, or now we like to call it actual interviews, is like you're talking to these people. And we say that it's not something that you can achieve with a survey. Because when you're speaking to someone, you look at their eyes, you look at what gets them nervous, what makes them happy when you're talking about your problem. So this is an exercise we did, and we are incredibly proud of how these young students who are doing this coursework that is planned for our MBA class. So they come in, we said, okay, we're going to pilot this with you. And then they go and put all of these learnings that they're getting from these interviews into an AI system that tells them, okay, I can find some patterns there. I can find that the pain that you were feeling or the job that you were trying to solve for your customers is not what you were thinking, but you can actually do this. And the feedback that we get from our students, that it helped us in the creativity piece of it to understand, we did not think about this customer segment, or we did not think about using this consumer channels. And then they end up making those wise pivots or iterations. If they were making something for athletes, they realize, oh, it can actually work for senior citizens. And I think that's where the whole human edge of intelligence comes into place, that Haas is really about, like, question, think, innovate. And this is what you all young entrepreneurs have to do. First talk to humans and then build.
Thank you, everyone. So I'm just going to ask one quick question. We are off time, but one question for all of you, so that these people get a second to think about their answers. What is one thing you will never fully outsource to AI? So think about it. Once we are done, I would encourage you to share it with the person sitting next to you. Think hard. And with that, who's ready to give the answer? Quick, quick, quick. One thing you will never give to AI fully.
Community building and finding people for our programs.
Okay.
Showing care for the students and the people in the room.
Love.
The tussle of what to make for dinner. I think I love. Yeah, I love, I know it seems so cumbersome, especially here in the Bay Area since I started living. It seems like a productivity thing to navigate, but I was chatting with somebody over at lunch. I think just that one human thing to go with the uncertainty of what to make for a family of 2 or a single person or 3 people, just to deal with that uncertainty, I think it's the greatest simulation to deal with life and to arrive at an answer that leaves you nourished and satisfied. And if we take that away and ask ChatGPT to prepare a year-long meals calendar, we let go of asking people in the house and ourselves, what do I really want now? Not for optimization, but for nourishment and honesty and authenticity.
I have to say, when we hear you speak, the wisdom shows.
Meet my parents.
So my answer is going to be meeting friends. I am known for just walking my dogs and making random conversations, and they start coming to home for dinners, and before you know, my daughter is sitting right there. And they give me a lot of food for thought, which converts into these kind of books which I write. So I think making friends. Yeah, but thank you. We are out. Kannan is showing me the hand, but please do tell your neighbor what was your answer for what you will never fully outsource to AI and why. Thanks, Kannan.